Welcoming you to a life of awareness, the Presence Project is excited for you to join us for today's podcast with your host, Paul Kersner.
Hello and welcome to episode 79 of Are You Being Present? My name is Paul. I want to welcome you to the present moment. I want to welcome you to the here and now. And I want to thank you wholeheartedly, sincerely, and deeply for joining me in this magnificent present moment. The title and topic for today's podcast is Guilt and Shame are Negative Motivators that Prevent Presence. And this is definitely an important topic for everyone listening because guilt and shame are woven into the fabric of the matrix, of societal programming, of dogma, of most religious beliefs. It's not to say that I have any issue with religion at all. I don't. It's the control mechanisms that are built in that I do take issue with. These control mechanisms are used and are pervasive all throughout society. Negative motivators. I discuss these often throughout my podcast series. I discuss it often in clinic, and I think about it often as I go throughout my day and my life and make the most of my present seconds. It's important for us, for me, to reflect on what is motivating me and why it is motivating me. Negative motivators will never lead you to a positive place. That is a truth that I believe. I have seen this within my own reality as well as the people that I work with. And it's a concept that I ask you to really sit with. I want you to understand that a negative motivator such as guilt or shame will never lead you to a positive place. Yet guilt and shame are used all throughout our lives. Guilt and shame are used to control us. They're used to make us feel bad. They're used to make us do things that we don't necessarily want to do. The problem is that it's used so quickly, and it's a tool of the ego that is either used by others onto us, it's used by us onto others, or it's the ego using guilt or shame to control us. Negative motivators, such as guilt and shame, and I want to keep on bringing them up, guilt and shame, because if you think about the way they sound and the way they feel, that's not good at all. But why guilt and why shame? Why is one made to feel guilty? Why is one made to feel ashamed? Where does that come from? Why is that used so often? More importantly, what effect does guilt and shame have on the present moment? Guilt and shame have a profound effect on the present moment, on your ability to be present. If one feels guilty, it has to do with actions that took place in the past. And so there are times where other people will use these things against you to make you feel bad about things that have happened, and will subsequently make you feel guilty about the things that might happen. Shame is the same way. To be ashamed, to feel bad about who you are, about what's happened, about how things are in your life. None of this is good at all, but it needs to be addressed because it is so common throughout our programming, throughout our thought structure, through the way that we behave, through our schooling, through our childhood, through our adulthood. How many times do we have to feel guilt or shame before we understand what it is and we put a stop to it? We end it. We say no more. Why do we have to do this to anyone else when we know it doesn't feel good? Why do we have to be the recipient of guilt and shame? We don't. We can stop this now if we understand what it is. And it is a negative motivator. It is a tool of the ego, of your ego, and of other people's egos to control, to cause harm. There's no positive effect that guilt or shame can have upon you or anyone else. And there's no positive effect that guilt or shame will have ever on the present moment. Now, there might be people that might disagree with me, and that's fine. Everyone is entitled to their own opinion. But if we zoom out enough and we see what guilt and shame are, and how insidious and disgusting it is, a way to treat others and to treat ourselves, we'll start to see that it is a program that needs to be uninstalled. It needs to be addressed. It needs to be a topic of conversation, why it is so pervasive, why we use it so freely, and how we can stop it. There are much better ways to motivate ourselves and others, yet we default to feeling guilty, to feeling bad about something that we did. Our ego knows that our memories and our imaginations can be altered, and the ego will do everything it can to modify memories to make us feel guilty or ashamed of things that might have happened in the past. And I'm not here to challenge your memories or your imagination. I'm here to inform you that the memories that you have are shaded through a filter, and the imagination that you have oftentimes is based on the past. And the ego will use the past and the future against you to take you out of the present moment. And the ego loves to use guilt and shame. It's a very effective tool, very precise tool that will eject you out of the present moment, cause you to start thinking and feeling things that have nothing to do with the here and now. More often than not, we're safe and secure. Yet our ego loves to run stories and create mental movies about things that might have happened or might happen, but never really did. When I say the ego, I'm talking about that voice in your head, that loud voice in your head that's constantly chattering. And for some people, it chatters from the moment you wake up to the moment you go to bed, and it can keep you up all night thinking about things that are not relevant, that are not real, that have nothing to do with the here and now, with your present moments. Yet you allow it to pollute your present moments with all of these imaginings of the future or all these memories of the past that are woven with guilt and shame. Now is the time for us to awaken to the fact that we do not have to feel guilty or ashamed of anything or anyone. We have to free ourselves from these constructs, from these tools, from these negative motivators, so that we can be free and fully present. Now, I'm not here to absolve you of anything that you might have done that was wrong per se, but the question remains, can you do anything about that in this present moment? No, you have to make peace. And there might be some wrongs that you have to right. I don't know what you've done. But I know if you continue to live presently, and you live honorably, and you live with virtue, and you do the right thing consistently, then there's nothing to regret. There's nothing to be ashamed about. There's nothing for you to feel guilty about. But even if there were missteps, how does guilt and shame fix any of that? We have to be able to see things objectively, clearly, to analyze them, to see them, and to learn from them so we don't repeat them. Guilt and shame just actually keep us stuck in a loop. So we end up repeating the same behaviors over and over again. And who thrives in that kind of scenario? The ego, your ego, someone else's ego, all egos. I've spent a lot of time in this podcast series talking about the ego, the loud voice in your head, and how unhelpful it is. And the only way to really see it is to learn to use your presence tools, to learn to calm yourself so you can see the ego and the thought streams for what they are. Untruths. So you can see guilt and shame for what it is. Negative motivators. Now is the time for all of us to stop using negative motivators. Negative motivators will not lead us to a positive place. I can't stress that enough. And it's important for you and I to observe our behavior, our thoughts, and recognize when we start implementing negative motivators won't even take us to anywhere neutral. They'll keep us in a negative frame of mind, a negative state of being, filled with negative emotions. And that has the ability to steal our presence. Not only the ability, it will. Because all the negative feelings that you're going to feel have nothing to do necessarily, and most of the time, with what's going on right in front of your face. So there are questions that one needs to ask about why you feel the way you do, about whatever situation that you're involved in. And one needs to ask oneself, am I feeling guilty? Do I feel ashamed? What's going on here? Where is this coming from? Why am I doing this? What is my motivation? And all of these questions and all of these awarenesses become available to you in the present moment. That's why it's so important to have a presence practice done, preferably, or I would advise first thing in the morning, so you create that anchor point. And as you go throughout your day and you start to get pulled out, you have the tools to work your way back to the present moment. But even asking yourself, am I being present, is a good gut check. And then starting to look at the motivators that are pushing you, that are controlling you, that are leading you astray. Negative motivators will not lead you to a positive place, will not allow you to live in a positive state of mind at all, ever. Now's the time for us to address this, to stop feeling guilty for the things that have happened, to stop making other people feel guilty, to stop allowing our ego to make us feel guilty. And the same thing goes with shame. There's no reason to allow this to go on any further. It's time for us to stop using guilt and shame as tools. And it's time for us to stop allowing others to use them against us. This is a part of presence. This is a part of waking up. This is a part of breaking free from societal constraints, from the matrix, from seeing it for what it is. Because the way society indoctrinates us is using negative motivators to control us. And then we use those same negative motivators inside of our own minds, inside of our own heads. They're tools the ego uses constantly to create cycles of negative thought streams. So we get lost and we lose the moment. Wake up, my friends. Now's the time to stop. It's time to be more neutral. It's time to stop using guilt and shame from here on out.
Thank you for listening to the Are You Being Present podcast, brought to you by the Presence Projects. Remember, you have a choice. Choose to be present.